Hi Legion, John Hittler, co-founder of Evoking Genius and co-creator of the Genius Discovery Process, with another edition of Pure Genius. Hey, you had it as a kid, like an insurmountable challenge. You have it as an adult. Maybe on your team, you get a really tough, big challenge, and you're not sure you can do it. You are sure that you probably don't have the talent on your team to pull it off. What do you do when you have no choice? How do you accomplish an otherwise insurmountable or impossible task? Well, remember when you were a kid and you guys had to sell chocolate or candy for Halloween, or you had to send gift wrap for the holidays, or you had to sell calendars or raffle tickets, and you didn't know any better, did you? They simply said, we're giving you 50 raffle tickets, you got to sell them at $1 a piece and give us the 50 bucks to raise money for the school. You didn't know any better, so you just got to work. We call that the wisdom and power of ignorance, and you see it in kids all the time. Well, that same power exists for adults if they'll use it. So what if you could use it? What if you could use a tool specifically for what I'll call insurmountable or impossible goals? That's what we're going to take on today. Here's our promise. We're going to give you the outline of how it works to use what we call the wisdom and power of ignorance. And then we're going to give you the neurological underpinnings why it works. Because you see it working in kids, and we kind of teach it out of them. Kids can do almost anything. They're not held back by obstacles or impossibilities. They simply say, why not? We're going to teach you all that today. Want to play? Great. Let's spin the big wheel. I'll start with a quick story. I have 7 kids. The second youngest, a boy, was fortunate enough in an 8-month period to play on 2, not 1, but 2 national championship athletic teams. One in soccer, and then again in basketball. He played 1 season total of basketball and he won a national championship. That's the kind of kid he is. Not a great athlete necessarily, but he just always shows up in the right place. Well, for the soccer national championship, they had a North, South, East, and West regional champ. We were the Western Regional Champions. We won the Western Region Championship in Las Vegas in a very difficult tournament in 110-degree heat in early August. Oh, tough, tough, tough. Well, every other region crowned a champion. You all met in Raleigh, North Carolina in the middle of August. Hot, 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 muggy, muggy, muggy. And you played each of the other regional winners. Whoever had the most points for victories and or ties, and then they had tiebreakers, was the national champ. Well, our kids flew to North Carolina. We hit tons of bad weather going across the country. So we got to North Carolina at midnight, and what the reputation from the West was that the Western teams were the most talented. California teams, Los Angeles area, or the Bay Area, either one, it didn't matter. They tended to be the most talented in the country because they played soccer year-round. Can't do that in other places. So the knock was always to try to level the playing field. What the Eastern region champs did, and they were our foe or our opponent for the first game, they scheduled the first game at 8 a.m. East Coast time. Well, our team didn't get into the hotel until about 11:30, almost midnight, the night before an 8 a.m. game. Now remember, 8 a.m. East Coast time was 5 a.m. West Coast time. So we had to adjust to the time change and play first thing in the morning. That was the natural bias. Well, our guys kind of figured out. They were kids, they didn't worry too much about it. But when we got there, they noticed that every kid on the other team was 4 inches taller and about 20 pounds heavier. They were blown away, absolutely blown away. We needed to put together a strategy based on these kids' based on the wisdom and power of ignorance, because they felt like, naturally, if they're bigger and stronger, these guys will cream us. We saw that team, the Eastern Region's road to the finals. They won games like 8-1, 11-0. And what we also found out about them, they were a 5-county all-star group. So they took the best kids from 5 neighboring counties, put them together, and they called that their team. It was really an all-star team. Our kids were the same team all year round. It was our Saturday, what you might call our Saturday morning league team. Now we played all year round, but that was it. We had 12 or 13 Latino players. My son, who was called El Juaro, the towhead, and another blonde-haired kid who was called El Juarito, the little blonde-haired kid. That was our team. We were kind of ragtag. Most of the kids didn't have any money. Their families struggled to pay the fees to play. And here we are in North Carolina battling Goliaths from a suburban team outside of Atlanta. Well, they were sure that these guys were going to crush us because they saw how many goals they scored against all their opponents leading up to the national championship. We got there, we sat them down because they were excited but scared. And this is 15 minutes before the game. We said, why are you guys going to beat these guys? Why? And of course, none of our kids could figure it out. They had some bravado and it was kind of false. We said, you guys have a huge advantage over these guys. They've never played really as a team. They're a bunch of individuals and they're all good players, but they don't play as a team like you guys do. You guys basically have been playing together for a couple of years, even though you're only 11 years old. You've been playing together. You've got a natural advantage over these guys. And in a team sport, you should be able to run circles around them. Our guys kind of thought, well, is that pop? Is that really? But they're bigger, and they're stronger, they're faster, they could push us around. Huh. They weren't sure, but they were willing to consider the possibility, like kids do. Adults, that's a harder sell. For kids, they said, hey, yeah, that's right, we do, I know, you're right, I've been playing. And we went out and whooped those kids. And they went on and whooped everybody and won the national championship. It was a fun time. But what we realized was, one of the reasons we beat these teams, they had good talent, maybe as good a talent as we did. But our kids weren't smart enough. And I won't say smart like an academic smart or an intelligent smart. They just weren't wise enough to realize, why not? Why can't we? What's so impossible about this? They put the wisdom and power of ignorance to work for them, and it did. Kids are great at this. So we say it a lot. What's the difference between the way a kid thinks, or the way a kid's brain works, and an adult? What's the difference between kids and adults? My theory is height. That's the only difference. We're essentially grown-up, big versions of kids. So why can't this strategy work for you when you've got an insurmountable or quote-unquote impossible task? Got it? Well, let's put it to work for you. So first off, we promised you we'd give you the neuroscience underpinnings of how ignorance actually works in your favor to accomplish insurmountable tasks. And you've done this in your life. You said, I have no idea. I was in way over my head. I have no idea how I even got in that thing. And then I won it, and it was one of the proudest days of my life. Wow. How did that happen? Well, you kind of said, how did I get here? Why? Well, I may as well just relax and go. And you did it. Well, there's a neurological backdrop for that, and we're going to get to that in a second. Let's say, now you're an entrepreneurial team. You're growing. You've got $500,000 in revenue. You've had a great couple of years. You've gotten off the ground. You're making 50 grand yourself. Your team is pulling in 500,000 gross revenue. You've got a small team, and you want to get to what seems like a huge milestone, which is 5 million, 10 times what you're making now. It's a lot. From where you are now, that seems like kind of a distant possibility. You go, really? Us? Only got 3 of us. How are we going to pull that off? Well, first off, you say, I want to go 10x on the revenue. You know what I'd also like to do? I'd like to go 10x on my income. For all the work and all the risk and whatnot, wouldn't it be great to be making 500 instead of 50? Oh, well, why not? Why not? Here's how it works. If you go 50% growth per year, it'll take you 6 years to do that, to go 10x. If you double every year, it'll take you 3.5 years. That's it. Now for a small entrepreneurial company, those are shockingly big numbers for a Fortune 500 company. They don't double every year. But for a growing entrepreneurial firm, you will be going at a big clip or you'll go out of business. 50% is not unusual. 100% is obviously aggressive, but you go 10x in 3.5 years if you double. Wow, that now seems possible, doesn't it? Gee, all we have to do is go double, really 4 years in a row, and we go 10x on both our gross revenue and ideally on my income as well. Good. So what do you start with? Literally, what do you start with? You start with the question, what if? What if we got revenues to 500,000? Well, but boss, we're only at 500. Go, but what if we were at 500? Or what if we were at 5 million instead of 500? It's a great question. What it does is it opens up possibilities by simply asking the question. This is part of the neuroscience. We'll get into the exact steps, but this is part of it. Asking that fundamental question, and kids are fabulous at this because kids live in the world of possibility. Well, now that you've opened up the what if, your mind has it. Your mind has this $5 million number and it won't let go because that's the way your mind works. Your mind's funny that way. When your mind gets a number or a concept or a fallacy, you ever had this? You go to a dinner party and you're introduced to somebody and somehow you get it in your head that her name is Jane and it's really Judy, and you keep calling her Jane because your brain has it, and you have to actually flush that and start over. Our brain gets that stuff really quickly. When we plant an idea, especially something that's visual, our mind captures it. It's just how neuroscience works. Your brain does it, my brain does it. Brains are good at that. Did you notice what happened though, is once you have it, you can't let go. Now, I've now aired or opened this possibility or blurted it out, what about 5 million? Now my brain has it. My brain won't let go. It's part of the process. Because now I'm, if you will, stuck with it, or screwed, or blessed with this concept of the wisdom and power of ignorance. My brain isn't willing to debate whether it's possible. My brain just goes to work on starting to create it. Perfect! That's what you want your brain to do. So here's some concepts that we know that sit underneath this, and this is why the wisdom and power of ignorance works so well. First off, your brain or your mind is neutral. It's neither moral nor amoral. It does what you program it to do. So when you program your brain with an idea, like 5 million gross revenue, your brain doesn't say, oh, you're an idiot. That's stupid. That's not possible. That's illegal. That's immoral. That's unethical. Your brain just locks on to 5 million. That's it. It says, oh, good, okay, neutral, yeah, fine. Almost like robotic. Your brain does that until you give it a different signal and override the first one. So your brain and your mind are neutral. They do what you tell it. Second, your brain doesn't let go of these ideas until you replace them with something else. So remember when you were a kid? What did you want to be when you grow up? You remember that, don't you? You want to be a fireman or a teacher or a nurse or a doctor, or you might want to be a pro baseball player, whatever it is. And you know what your parents did? They said, that's great, work hard. Because at 5, there was no reason to tell you that your chances of making it to pro sports were 0. They just said, good for you, that's great you want to be that. Because it's a world of possibilities. And you didn't give up on that until you replaced it with something later in life. You said, well, I'm probably not going to make the NFL or the NBA or Major League Baseball. But you know what, I would like to be a paralegal. Or I'd like to be in the trades. Or I'd like to start a business. Once you replace it with something, your brain is willing to at least set it aside or give up on it. But your brain doesn't ever forget these. That's why you remember. Oh yeah, when I was a kid I wanted to be this, this, or this. Wow, we all know that. Your microprocessor or your central processing unit, your brain, works 24/7. Your brain's job is to solve problems and to give creative energy to questions that you leave it with. So 5 million, you don't have the answer. You just have a directive. When you give your brain 5 million and you're currently at 500,000, your brain works on it 24/7, whether you're consciously processing it or not. Great, let's put your brain to work then. Like when you're sleeping, what a great time for your brain to come up with creative ideas. You ever notice that? When you wake up in the morning and say, I got a great idea. Why didn't I ever think of this? Because for some reason, you programmed it, or you planted that, or you intuited it before you went to sleep. Your brain worked on it all night, and in the morning you have this fabulous idea. That's how your brain works. Good. Let's put the neuroscience to work. Here's a tricky one, and people don't realize this one. The brain deals much better in the present and future tense, which is really possibility, than it does in the past, which is historical. Now, we all talk about the past. We say, well, when I was little, I was this and that. But you notice that if you tell a story, and your mom tells a story about the same thing, your siblings, your sister, or your brother tell a story about the same thing, they're all a little bit different because they're subject to interpretation. You also notice if you tell it year after year after year, the story changes just a little bit. Your brain doesn't work as well with past details as it does with present and future details. Your brain is present mostly, wants to be there, also deals better in the future. But it'll deal with the future as if it's the present. That makes sense? So always, it's a great idea to speak as if you're in the present tense. Your brain does really well with that because it's concrete. Your brain also only comprehends affirmative commands. You've heard this. Where do you want to go to dinner? Well, I don't want to go out for pizza. That would be the answer to where do you not want to go to dinner. I didn't ask you that. Well, people say, well, I want to lose 10 pounds. You go, yeah, what do you want? Where do you want to be at? Instead of saying I want to lose 10 pounds, what if you spoke it as the affirmative and said, I want to weigh 178? Oh, much more affirmative. Your brain understands a concrete number like the weight you want to be at much better than it does a concept called losing 10 pounds, because you have to then know where you're starting from, what happens when you lose 10 but gain 4 back, and if you just dwell on 178 and say, my perfect weight is 178, not mine, but if that's your weight, your brain understands that concrete number. So speak to yourself and others in the affirmative in terms of commands. Your brain does much better with that than it does with abstract or negative, telling what you don't want. You got it? Okay, good. So now let's give you a formula for putting together the wisdom and power of ignorance. So you get this gigantic, your boss comes to you and says, you know what, here's this goal for your team. You know, really, us? Or you as the leader say, you know what, guys, I don't know how we're going to do it. We're going to 5 million. You in? And they go, I guess if I want to come to work tomorrow, I guess I'm in. How do you get them in the ignorance of, we have no idea how to get to 5 million. We're at 500,000. Who, us? We're going to get to 5 million? How are we going to do that? Here's the strategy, or here's the formula for getting them started. State or restate the objective in simple, affirmative, present tense language. You got it? State or restate the objective in simple, affirmative, present tense language. It would look something like this. We are a $5 million company. Huh. Wow. Or we generate $5 million in gross revenue. Now, do you? No, you're at 500. When you start speaking it as if it's present tense and as if it's true, and in the affirmative, your brain locks onto it and it immediately starts going to work on it. Immediately. Then ask the next question. So the first is restate the goal in simple, affirmative, present tense language. Secondly, ask this question, or a version of this question. What if? What if we were a $5 million company? Or what might we look like? Or what would it take for us to be a $5 million company? But what if is the simplest. It's super open-ended and allows your brain's full creative ability to go to work. Left lobe and logical. Left and right. Got it? So ask, what if? What if? Third, remind yourself presently and continually about the goal. So this could be a yellow sticky on your bathroom mirror. It could be a reminder on your phone that pops up once a day. It could be a banner in your lunchroom. We are a $5 million company. State it or pronounce it or publish it in present tense language publicly so that you're reminded of it and your brain continues to get that message that we're a $5 million company. And last, the only action item that you really have to start on is to figure out what's the top one or the first thing, either way you want to language it, what's the top one thing I need to work on to start getting to 5 million. Not to complete it. You don't have to solve the whole problem. You don't have to have a business plan. You don't have to say 3 years from now I'll be doing this. How do you start on that process? When you do that, every time you complete your top one, you'll then say, good, we got the first thing done. What's the next top one? You always have a top one. Some people work with a top 3, but always have a top one. What's the one thing we need to be working on to become a $5 million company? That's all you have to do. And your brain, your central processing unit, will go to work on solving for that equation, if you will. You're simply using the neuroscience and the structure and functionality of your greatest gift, which is your central processing unit, to solve big problems. And you're doing it consciously using the wisdom and power of ignorance. The truth is you don't know how to do it. You're ignorant in that. But that means you're not limiting anything that might come up. That's where the power comes. Is you're not squelching anything by saying, well, we already know how to do that. It's not possible. You simply say, what's the first thing we might do or we can do to march on that path? See how simple that is? Powerful, and even the wisdom in it. Well, whether your kids are selling candy or raffle tickets or gift wrap door to door, and they're working to be the #1 salesperson in the school so they win an Xbox console, against 800 other kids in the same neighborhood knocking on the same doors, it's the same process. For you as an adult with your team to say, gosh, we're going to go to $5 million gross revenue. We really don't know how. We just know we want to do it, and we're trusting that we'll figure it out on the way. That's the wisdom and power of ignorance. If this is helpful, please like and share this with your constituency. It'll help them as well. Until we meet again on Pure Genius, all the best.